So what I thought I would do in my video today is talk about microblading and traditional permanent makeup on your eyebrows. How the two are different and what would be the best choice for you depending on your situation. So let's start with traditional permanent makeup on your eyebrows. A lot of people have had it. It's been around for probably 30 years now. I know I've been doing it for 25, so maybe it's even longer than that. But traditional permanent makeup, you know, eyebrow tattooing, eyeliner, and full lips has been around for a really long time. So with traditional permanent makeup, what it started out with was just, you know, a machine or a hand tool. Both have been used for many years. Tattooing started out with a hand tool, so you can actually do a tattoo without using a machine. So there's a couple different methods, but a lot of the technicians have been using a machine, and they would just do a traditional solid shading where they would just color in your eyebrow and just fill it in solid. So that's not as popular anymore, just because hair stroke eyebrows are a little more natural looking. I mean, it's never going to be hair, but you're drawing little strokes that look like simulated hairs across your eyebrow area. So that's become very popular, and that is something that you can do with either a hand tool or a machine as well. So with traditional permanent makeup, when you have your eyebrows done, you know, the technician will use a machine, and what the machine does is it has either a single needle or a cluster of needles that push the pigment through your epidermis into your dermis. And so what we're trying to do is pack a bunch of color in your dermis so that the color is opaque. So whether it's a solid shading or if they're hair strokes, each hair stroke is very defined and has full even color, or if you have a solid shading, there's even color all the way through your eyebrow. Another really important thing about permanent makeup to know before you have it done is that when you go in and you have it done, it always looks really dark. And it stays looking dark for about 2 to 4 days. So when you have traditional permanent makeup done, the reason that is like that is because when we do it and we use a machine, it pushes the pigment through your epidermis into your dermis. But as it's passing through your epidermis, it's depositing pigment in your epidermis. But you're not going to retain the color that's in that layer of skin. Everything in your epidermis is going to slough off over the course of 7 days. And the only color you're going to retain is what's in your dermis. Where microblading, on the other hand, isn't quite as dramatic right after, because what we do is make these little tiny fine cuts in your skin, and so that's exactly what they are. They're tiny and fine, so it doesn't look, you know, super dark or anything. So microblading is actually not that bad right after you get it done. It doesn't change that much in the healing process. So what the machine is like is it's basically like, I use just an electric pen, and you know, you turn it on and it buzzes and the needles go up and down really fast, and you know, I draw on your face. With a hand tool or for microblading, basically it's just a series of inline needles, and what we do is we just place this, what they call a microblade, on your skin and push and drag, and what it does is it makes little cuts in your skin. So it doesn't, there is color on the tool when we cut your skin, but then after we make all the little cuts, then we rub color all over that area in your eyebrow area and just leave the color on and let the color fall into the cuts. So it's unlike a machine, it's not pushing the pigment into your skin. What it's doing is making the cuts, and then when you rub the color over it and let it sit, whatever falls into those little cuts that I've made is what's going to heal into your skin. So a big question is it really permanent? Well, kind of, sort of, not really. It really depends on what you're getting done. I mean, if you have your eyebrows done with a machine, then you most likely will have color in your skin for many years. Like I said, all technicians are not created equal, and not all technicians work it in as much as another one does. So if you have a technician that didn't work it in as much, then you could eventually lose all of the color. But if you have a technician that works the color in so it's real even and opaque, then you probably will have color for many years. And with regard to microblading being permanent, most microblading, I would say about 80% of the color after 2 to 3 years is pretty much gone, and you're only going to have maybe 20% of the color. So it's definitely not permanent. It's more semi-permanent. So another question is, how long does the microblading last versus the traditional tattooing? Well, microblading, depending on how skilled the technician is, should last between 1 to 2 years. And then the traditional tattooing will look really good for a couple years, maybe 2 to 3, but after 3, the color starts to oxidize, so you have to get it touched up anyway. So really, if you think about it, it really just, depending on what you're a candidate for and what you end up having done, it really doesn't matter, because you're only talking maybe 6 months to a year before you actually need a touch-up. Then the next question is always, will I need a touch-up? Well, you may need a touch-up about a month later if you didn't retain the color perfectly and evenly all the way across your eyebrows. So I would say for me, 80% of the people don't need a touch-up, but then you've got 20% of the people that do. And lots of times it's just a little tweak. You don't need to go over the whole thing again. So I would say, it really depends on the person and how still you were when the technician was working on you. If you let her do her job and work the color in, then you're less likely to need a touch-up. But it's different for everybody, but typically if you do need a touch-up, you should go in within about 30 days after, within 30 to 60 days, so that the color is all put in at the same time and it oxidizes at the same rate, and it looks pretty much the same for the years that you're going to wear it. When you have the traditional permanent makeup, the color stays in your skin for many years, depending on how well the technician worked it in. So if it was worked in really well, then you're going to have really nice color for probably 2 to 3 years. And over time, the color is going to change. It's not going to stay exactly the same color as when you got it 2 or 3 years ago. It does what they call oxidize. So when the color oxidizes, it ends up turning more toward the base color in the color that was implanted in your skin. So with that being said, you're still going to have color in your skin, but it's not going to be the same exact color as what you got 2 or 3 years ago. So after about 3 years, you're going to have your permanent makeup touched up, regardless if you had it done with a machine or a hand tool. If you're looking into having your eyebrows done and you're not sure whether to do microblading or to do the traditional permanent makeup procedure, I would say, my personal opinion is if you've never had anything done before on your eyebrows, then you're a great candidate for microblading. Microblading is awesome because it doesn't leave a lot of residual color in your skin over the years, because we're not working that pigment in a lot. So the good thing about that is when it does fade, you don't have a lot of residual color to cover up if it's oxidized. But on the other hand, if you have had a lot of permanent makeup in the past and you've had your eyebrows done a couple times, because permanent makeup's been around for so long, there are so many people who've been having it done for years. And now they think, well, I'd like to have that microblading done. Well, unfortunately, you're probably not a candidate for it, because the microblading strokes are so thin and hair-like that it's hard to cover up the color that you have underneath your skin. So that's when I would say do the traditional permanent makeup, but you need to find a technician that knows how to do hair strokes with a machine and a single needle. So it's just one single needle, so it makes a really skinny little line for each hair stroke. So not every technician knows how to do that, so it's not the easiest thing to find. It's much easier to find someone who does microblading than it is to find someone who does a hair stroke eyebrow with a machine. The reason that you need it done with a machine is because what happens is when you do it with a single needle, you can make perfect hair strokes, but they're a little bit thicker than the microblading. So they can cover up what's under your skin much better than the microblading can. So you can still get a hair stroke eyebrow, but it's just not really what they call microblading, but it's very similar to that. A lot of people wonder, well, how am I going to find a really good technician? Well, permanent makeup artists there's a lot of them. There's a lot of people who do microblading, but now microblading's so big, it's a real quick class that you can take, and there's in a lot of the states there's no legislation. So we got a lot of new people doing microblading, but unfortunately not everybody knows exactly what they're doing because they haven't taken enough classes. So the good thing to do is find someone, I think, who's been doing permanent makeup first for a good amount of time and also does microblading. Because if you go to someone who only does microblading, then they only know how to give you the traditional microbladed eyebrows because they're taught to measure it off in such a way that gives you more of the boxy eyebrows. So if you go to a technician who's been doing permanent makeup for a long time before doing the microblading, then you're more likely to get what you want if you don't want just the traditional microbladed eyebrows. I've definitely seen some really good jobs with microblading and really bad jobs with microblading. So if you go to somebody that only does microblading, you might want to ask them how long they've been doing it and ask for before and after pictures. But I think the mistake that people make is they don't ask them when they look at before and after pictures if this is their actual work or if it's just stock pictures that they've gotten off the internet. Because I've had some people that said, oh yeah, I went to this woman and she did my eyebrows and I'm really unhappy. But I saw her pictures before she did it and they were great, they looked so good. But sometimes technicians are showing you pictures of other people's work and not their actual work, and I think that's really important. So if you're in the market to have your eyebrows done, you might want to really do your research and really look into the person's history, how long they've been doing it. Look at some before and after pictures, maybe check them out online, see if they have some reviews. If you do that, then you'll probably get a better result. Or if you're referred to somebody. But if you ask that technician if you can see their before and after pictures, it's real important to ask them if this is their actual work. Because I think a lot of technicians, when they first start out, they just get some stock pictures off online and they show you the way eyebrows are supposed to look when they're perfectly done. But it's not their actual work. So I think that's really important. But also, the reading the reviews is really important because there's Google reviews and there's Yelp reviews, and I think it's important to read both. But take into consideration if they have a lot of really good reviews and then one bad review, you can't please everybody. People are liable to have one bad review, but if they have a lot of bad reviews, then they're probably not the person that you're going to want to go to. So definitely do your research before you choose a technician. When I've had clients come into me and they've had permanent makeup, whether it be, with microblading or just regular tattooing, what I ask them when they say that they're unhappy with the shape or, the thickness or whatever, I always ask them, did the technician draw this on you before she started working on you? Did you see what you were gonna get before she even started? I think that's really important. I know that with traditional microblading, what they do is they mark it off, and so they make the areas where they're going to put it pretty clear, but it's more of a box. They don't actually draw on hair strokes, so you can't actually see what your eyebrow is going to look like. Where for me, what I do is I take a semi-permanent marker and I actually draw on each hair stroke. So their eyebrow is completely drawn on both sides before I start. And then what I do is after they approve it, which you should be able to do before the technician starts working on you, is I trace over what I drew on. So you know what you're gonna get before you get it. So that's really important. You definitely want to have an idea of what you're going to get. If you don't ask the technician for a specific thing, they should be asking you, do you want the beginning to be more rounded or more square? What kind of an arch do you want? So before they even start working on you at all to do all that, they should ask you these specific questions so they have an idea of what you like. And for me, if I was going to have my eyebrows done, I would go in with my eyebrows, basically drawn on the way I like them, so they already know what shape I'm wearing and what I'm used to. And if they think, they have a suggestion, which might make your eyebrows look better, then that's great, but at least they have something to go by. So another super common question is does it hurt? It can. It depends on your pain tolerance and if you get numb very easily. Some people get numb more easily than others. With permanent makeup, we always numb our clients prior to, and you should have the numbing cream for about a half hour. The technician should definitely put the numbing cream on you for a minimum of a half hour before she starts your procedure. Some people say that they were only numbed for 10 or 15 minutes, and that's definitely not gonna do much. So about a half hour is pretty much how long you typically have to be numb for. So the good thing about having the traditional permanent makeup done is that while they're working on you, they can continue to numb you, because they'll put the numbing on in between the different passes and they'll wipe it off, and then they'll use the machine, which will push the pigment into your skin. So they can continually numb you while you're getting worked on with a machine. But when you're having microblading, you can't really do that because you don't want to fill those little cuts with the numbing gel, basically. So while you're actually having the procedure, when you're doing microblading, you're not really able to be numb, that's how I do it with my clients, because I want them to get as much color in those little cuts as possible. So the problem with it is we go over your eyebrow once and do all the little cuts, and then we put the color in, and then we want to make a little more little ones to fine tune it. So you're not really able to numb the client throughout the procedure. So that's the difference between the two. So that's probably why I would say microblading hurts a little bit more than the traditional permanent makeup. Before going in to have your procedure done, try not to do anything that's going to thin your blood. Like, don't go out drinking the night before. Don't take any blood thinners, baby aspirin. Fish oil is a blood thinner. I think a lot of people are finding that out now. And, if you're on Coumadin or if you take any vitamin E, you probably shouldn't do that. And, drinking the night before is a huge one. A lot of people, will drink wine every night, but if you're thinking that you're going to have something like this done, or any procedure that is going to cut your skin in any way, you definitely don't want to do anything that's going to thin your blood. The post-care for both procedures is really just the same. I mean, any permanent makeup procedure is always, what I always tell my clients is, it's a 7-day post-care period. So throughout that 7 days, you're gonna wanna keep an ointment on. I give my clients A&D ointment. It's vitamin A and D, and it's like a Vaseline texture. And what it does is it keeps your eyebrows moist and occluded so that they don't dry out and scab up. I know there's a couple different schools of thought on post-care, and some technicians say don't put anything on it, just let it get dry and scabby. Where I know from being in this business for 25 years that letting your eyebrows dry up and get scabby is really not the best post-care, because I do a lot of removal of permanent makeup. And so when I remove people's permanent makeup, I tattoo in an actual pigment remover, And what I say to them is just the opposite, which is, let it get dry and scabby so that, it can reach down into your dermis and lift the color out in the scab. So you're definitely going to want to keep them super lubricated every 2 hours for 7 days. And a lot of people say, well, do I have to send an alarm at night to get myself up to put this stuff on? And no, you don't have to do that. But if you get up to go pee in the middle of the night, which most of us do, just put some more on. So yeah, the post-care is super important. It's as important as what the technician does. So if you keep it really, really moist every couple hours all throughout the day for 1 week, then you should have really good retention. Hopefully I've answered most of the questions that you have about traditional permanent makeup and microblading. So remember, traditional permanent makeup is more for people if they've had a lot of permanent makeup done in the past and they have a lot of residual color in their skin. You're better off getting your work done with a machine or something that is going to be able to cover up all that old color. And then the microblading is more for people who, if you've had permanent makeup in the past and it's pretty much all gone and there's very, very little color left in your skin, then you can get microblading. Or if you've never had anything done before, or if you've had microblading done before, then you can have a touch-up with microblading. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you have any comments about what you'd like to hear about or this video in particular, I'd love to hear them. And if you ring the bell, it'll notify you of my videos that are uploaded every Tuesday at noon. So I hope you have a great day and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.